welcome to Christchurch Southport. My name is Tabs, here to introduce you to the 8th episode of this current series of CCS Online. If you're new watching this today, then a big welcome to you. We are a Church of England congregation here at the heart of Southport, with a heart for Southport. We join together here in different ways to build community, each growing and seeking the power of God to bring hope in relevant ways to today's society. We put Jesus at the centre and we see lives changed. So in a sec, I want to invite you to set aside this time to simply be still and ready your heart and mind to step further into the presence of God, wherever you are, giving him praise with a psalm and praying that you would find the faith and hope to hear him speak to you today as we carry on this series. Then we'll head over live to hear this week's message from our Sunday morning in-person gathering, have some music, and before we go, here's some ways that you can continue to connect with CCS. But before all that, here's a little bit of who we are.
Good morning, everyone. The reading this morning is taken from Matthew, chapter 14, verses 22 to 23. It can be found in the Church Bibles on page 981, and it'll be on the screen. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone. And the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me!" Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Good morning, everybody. How are we this morning? Quiet. That's fine. That's fine. It's great to be able to speak on this passage this morning, but before I speak, let me pray. Father God, this is a really, really familiar story, but I pray that we would be able to hear what you wanted to say to us as individuals and to us as a church this morning. Amen. Before I talk about the story of Peter and Jesus, I want to first talk about roller coasters. Does anyone here love roller coasters? A few people. Does anyone here hate roller coasters? A lot more people. I quite like roller coasters. I wouldn't say I love roller coasters, but I quite like roller coasters. I'm just taking my microphone off here. I quite like roller coasters. But whenever I've gone on one before, well, that is before I had kids, because I have kids now, and the only roller coasters I've ever been on for the last 9 years have been those caterpillar ones that go about 3 miles an hour, and my legs don't actually fit in it. Anyway, before I go on a normal big roller coaster, I get a little bit nervous. There's this moment before I join the queue to go on the roller coaster where I start thinking, do I really want to do this? It looks a little bit scary. Am I going to die? So I have this kind of internal battle going on inside my head about whether I step into the queue or whether I pretend maybe I just need the toilet or maybe I'm just feeling a bit queasy or maybe I should be the one that's really selfless and just holds everyone's bag so they can have a really good time. Now, I know once I'm in the queue for the roller coaster, there is absolutely no going back. Unless you've got a child with you and you can attribute blame upon them, there is no greater walk of shame than walking out of a roller coaster queue. In the end, most of the time, I step into the queue, and most of the time, I end up enjoying it, and the mixture of adrenaline and speed and nervous energy gives me this massive hit, and I feel massively alive. And most of the time, when I finish it and I leave the exit queue, I want to go on it straight back again because all the fear has been. I suspect in the story we heard today, when Peter was walking on water, Peter had some of those same feelings. The passage says, "Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus." I can imagine his thoughts and his feelings as he tentatively steps a leg over the edge of a boat and the soles of his sandals touch the water. His foot getting wet and wondering, how is this going to work? The feelings of nerves and the feelings of excitement. Thinking that he didn't pack a spare change of clothes, so what happens if this all goes terribly wrong? And yet the passage says, Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. Peter walked on water. We know later in the story that he starts sinking, but for a time, Peter was walking on the water. I imagine that his mind was being blown as he was stepping on the water. I imagine the feelings of excitement and adrenaline that filled him. I imagine that his heart was bursting with wonder at experiencing something of God's power. And I imagine that this experience changed his life forever. Yes, he starts drowning soon after, and Jesus has to rescue him. But I'm not sure that would have been the lasting memory for Peter. I think the lasting memory is not of failure, but of the water holding his weight. The look of Jesus smiling at him, and the feeling that God can do anything. John Ortberg writes, getting out of the boat was Peter's great gift to Jesus. The experience of walking on water was Jesus' great gift to Peter. I grew up in a church, and from a young age I've been told God is powerful. I've sang songs about my God being a great big God, including all the actions. I've got a theology degree, and I've discussed the arguments and boundaries of omnipotence, which is the fancy word for God having lots and lots of power. The Bible speaks of a God who makes the earth tremble, and with one word who can bring down nations. For most of us who have been in church for even a little while, we've been repeatedly told that God is powerful. But here is the problem. That information is not enough on its own to create courageous people. We can be told millions of times that God is powerful, but that information does not transform our hearts or our lives. For that information to be more than just nice information, for it to change our lives, certain actions and experiences are required. Peter could have been told lots and lots of times that Jesus was powerful, but that is different to experiencing it. To experience God's power, first Peter had to step out of the boat and onto the water. If Peter doesn't step out of the boat, Peter doesn't experience God's power. He doesn't walk on water, his life is emptier, and his vision of God is smaller because of it. Jesus was not going to force Peter out of the boat. Peter makes the first step, not knowing what is going to happen, but trusting in God. Before Peter could walk on water and know God's power, he had to take a step and get his feet wet. In the book, we've encouraged you to read alongside this series, which is John Ortberg's If You Want to Walk on Water, You've Got to Get Out of the Boat, which the passage is from today. John Ortberg asks this: what am I doing that I could not do apart from the power of God? If Peter answered that question, the answer would have been quick and it would have been easy. Peter can't walk on water apart from the power of God. How about you? Is there anything in your life right now that you couldn't do without God's help? And if the answer is no, consider the possibility that you are seriously under-challenged. If you want to walk on water, you have to be willing to get your feet wet first. Then, and only then, will you discover it's worth the risk. When I take the risk of giving generously, I discover that I can really trust God to take care of me, but I have to get my feet wet first. When I take the risk of telling someone my deepest secrets and sins, I discover that God really will honour honesty and vulnerability, but I have to get my feet wet first. When I risk using my spiritual gifts, I can know the joy of being used by God, but I have to get my feet wet first. God generally helps people's faith grow by asking them to take the first step. Faith grows, transformation happens, wonder is created, God coming to life all normally begin by trusting God enough to take the first step. Simply understanding information about his power is not enough. We have to get our feet wet. We often don't know what will happen when we make that first step, but we do know that without that first nervous step, we will not walk on water. This is how God works. We take the scary, unknown step and God catches us, which causes us to be changed forever. God meets with people who trust him. God responds to people who give him control. God honours the first step. We don't need lots and lots of faith. We can be scared. We don't need to know the way. We only need to be able to take that first step. God will do the rest. But we will never know that. We will never be transformed by that. We will never trust that unless we experience it, unless we get our feet wet. Today is the last preach in our sermon series we've been looking at, which has been all about getting out of our comfort zones. Most of us will have a spiritual comfort zone, areas where we feel comfortable trusting God. Most of us would prefer to live inside our spiritual comfort zones. Most of us want God to be in control of the bits we trust him with, and we would like to be in control of absolutely everything else. All of us will have different comfort zones. What makes one person nervous will be comfortable for another. One person might start clamming up thinking about inviting a work colleague to Alpha. Others will invite everyone they see without any problem. For some, we might be able to easily discuss the past, but the idea of naming our current struggles to anyone would send us running. For others, we might be able to pray with our friends, but seeking reconciliation with someone who has hurt us, we might find deeply uncomfortable. But whatever our spiritual comfort zones are, however big or small they are, there is one thing that can happen to them. They can grow and they can shrink. The only way of growing our spiritual comfort zone and ultimately our trust in God is not to learn more information, but to take a step of faith. And the way of shrinking our spiritual comfort zone and ultimately shrinking our trust in God is to stay in the boat. Dry feet don't grow faith, they grow dead skin. This isn't just a one-time, big moment leap of faith thing. This is an everyday thing. Trying to step out of our comfort zones and into the arms of God. Pray every morning that God will help to show you how to get your feet wet, in what moments to trust him and in what moments to take a leap. Call someone who you've been trying to avoid calling out of fear. Encourage someone who you sense is low. Talk to someone about Jesus. Ask for forgiveness for someone who you were short with. Put your phone down for 10 minutes and have a real conversation with your spouse. Tell someone the truth. There are many moments in every single day where we have an opportunity to take a step, where our faith could grow, if only we see them and if only we take them. And as we take these little steps, our faith grows. Our love of God grows. Our trust in God grows. Our worship of God grows. Our effectiveness to be a light in this world grows. Our spiritual comfort zones grow. We grow. Now, if you're sitting here today thinking, I really don't know where God is calling me to walk on water, John Ortberg in his books gives 4 indicators that may help you know what your next step is. And I'm going to phrase them as questions. The first one is this: the indicator of fear. What are you afraid of doing for God? What are you holding onto? What deep down do you know you should be doing but aren't? Where do you need to be honest but are scared of the consequences? What haven't you shared with other people out of fear? The second indicator is the indicator of frustration. What makes you angry? What needs to change in Southport? What pain do you see daily, but you hold your tongue? How could your frustrations be used by God? The third indicator is the indicator of compassion. What makes you upset? Who do you feel empathy for? How can your compassion be used by God? And the final indicator is the indicator of prayer. What are you praying for? What always comes to mind when you're praying? What is God asking you to pray for consistently over weeks, months, or maybe even years? Are you praying? If you don't know what your first step might look like, then these 4 areas, fear, frustration, compassion, and prayer, are a good place to start. Walking on water is not about you doing something great and becoming a hero. It's about God doing something great through you, in you, and with you. But before God can do that, we have to take the first step. We have to get our feet wet. Let me pray.
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of light. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars were made to worship so alive, I can see your heart in everything you've made. of your promise. You don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature so alive, I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you, so will I. So will If the stars were made to worship, so will I. If the mountains bow in reverence, so will I. If the oceans roar your greatness, so will I. For if everything exists to lift you high, so will I. If the wind goes where you send it, so will I. If the rocks cry out in silence, so will I. If the sum of all our praises still falls shine, then we'll sing again 100 billion times. God of salvation, you chased down my heart through all of my failure and pride. On a hill you created, the light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Where you lost your life, so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you, so will I. I can see your heart in everything you've done. Every part designed in a work of art called love. If you gladly chose surrender, so will I. I can see your heart a billion different ways. Every precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love, then so will I. Like you would again 100 billion times. But what measure could amount to your desire? You're the one who never leaves the one behind.
Wonderful. I hope you've continued to sense God speak to you through our 8th episode now of the series. If you'd like to journey deeper into this week's message and allow it to shape and grow your faith even more so, then we've got some questions in the description or the comments for your reflection, or they could be good for your own private reflections, or even reflecting together with others, supporting and challenging one another. Do get in touch if anything has spoken to you in this episode. You can do that through either through the CCS office or even the YouTube comments if you feel comfortable. And if you want to stay connected, remember there's loads of ways to get involved with what's happening amongst the CCS family. You might want to connect with one of our missional communities, blessing this Southport town, or again, you just contact the office if that's the case, or if you just want to keep in the loop, you can sign up for our weekly email or check out this week's CCS news in the episode description or our social media channels. In fact, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell to make sure you never miss an episode of CCS Online. And give the like button a click so YouTube knows our episodes are worth sharing with others. We pray that you have a blessed week, and we look forward to joining with you again.